There's a wall of water in front of them, mountains hemming them in on both sides, and behind them, a cloud of dust rising off the desert floor. The fastest army in the world, chariots at full gallop, closing in fast. 2 million people. No weapons, no boats, nowhere to run. Every exit sealed. This is what a dead end looks like. But here's the part that makes this story so strange. They weren't lost. They hadn't stumbled into this trap by accident, and they hadn't disobeyed their way into it. They were standing on this exact patch of sand because God told them to be here. He led them, step by step, straight into the most hopeless position imaginable. Which is the strangest thing about the whole story. Israel wasn't trapped in spite of obeying God. They were trapped because they obeyed him. And that one detail changes everything about what happens next. Rewind a few days. Israel has just walked out of Egypt. 400 years of slavery, over in a single night. They're free, they're moving, and God himself is out in front leading them. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, where every last person can see it. But God doesn't take them the short way. There was a quicker road to the promised land, up along the coast. He deliberately avoids it. Instead, he does something that makes no military sense at all. He tells them to turn back and make camp with their backs to the sea. Think about that from a soldier's point of view. You take a massive, defenseless crowd and you deliberately pin them against a body of water they can't cross, with nothing but open desert behind them. It's the worst position imaginable. It's completely indefensible. So why would God march his own people into a corner like that? Because he wasn't setting a trap for Israel. He was setting one for Pharaoh. Back in Egypt, Pharaoh's grief curdles into rage. His entire slave labor force has just walked out the door, and he can't stand it. So he does the very thing God knew he would do. He changes his mind, and he goes after them. He scrambles the most fearsome military on earth, 600 elite chariots, plus every other chariot in Egypt, thundering across the sand after a crowd of unarmed former slaves who don't even know how to fight. And then Israel looks up. They see it on the horizon. The dust, the horses, the glint of Egyptian weapons growing larger by the second. The army they were sure they'd escaped forever is bearing straight down on them, and there is nowhere to go. The sea is at their backs. The most powerful force in the world is in front of them. And in that one moment, their brand new freedom feels like the cruelest joke anyone has ever played on them. Panic tears through the camp, and immediately they turn on Moses. Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? It's the same bitter refrain we'll hear from them again and again. We should have just stayed slaves. Better Egypt than this. The second things get hard, they're ready to hand their freedom back for chains. But listen to how Moses answers them. No panic, no scrambling for a battle plan. Just this. Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Stand firm, be silent, watch God work. In other words, this rescue is not going to come from you. You don't have a single weapon he needs. You have nothing to bring to this fight but trust. But then, God says something to Moses that seems to flatly contradict all of that. Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Stand still and go forward. Trust God to do what only God can do, and then start walking toward the sea as if it's actually going to open. Faith that stands still in the heart and steps out with the feet. Then, everything moves at once. That pillar of cloud that had been leading them slides all the way around behind them and drops like a curtain between Israel and the Egyptians. Darkness on the army's side, light on Israel's. And Moses lifts his staff out over the water. All night long, a strong wind roars across the sea. And the water splits. It piles up into walls on the right hand and the left. And down the middle, the seabed turns to dry ground. A road opens where a road is impossible. And Israel walks through the heart of the sea, walls of water towering over them on both sides, all the way to the far shore. But the Egyptians aren't finished. They charge straight in after them, chariots pouring down onto the seabed. And that is when God springs the trap. He jams their chariot wheels so they can barely move. He throws the entire army into chaos. And the Egyptians finally say the truest words they have ever spoken. The Lord is fighting for them. Let's get out of here. Too late. As the sun comes up, Moses stretches his hand over the sea one last time, and the walls of water collapse. The sea crashes back down on Pharaoh's army, every chariot, every horse, every soldier. Gone. Not one of them survives. And Israel stands safe on the far shore and watches the bodies of their enemies wash up on the sand. The same water that had been a highway of rescue for them became a grave for Egypt. Now, go back to the thing that made this story so strange in the first place.
Israel was trapped because they obeyed. God's own guidance, the cloud out front, the command to turn back to the sea, is exactly what walked them into that dead end. And that is one of the most important things this story has to teach us. Being cornered is not the same thing as being out of God's will. We tend to assume that if we're doing the right thing, the road should get smoother. And this story blows that assumption apart. God led his people to a place with no exit on purpose, because a rescue like this could only happen at a dead end. If there had been any other escape route, Israel would have taken it and walked away thinking they'd saved themselves. God backed them against the sea so that when deliverance came, there would be no confusion about who did it. A dead end in the will of God is not the end of the story. Sometimes it's the exact place you finally see what he can do. And this rescue became the story Israel told forever. Whenever they wanted to say who their God was, they pointed straight back to this, the God who makes a way through the sea. But it points to something even bigger, because the Red Sea is the whole Bible's picture of salvation. Every one of us starts out trapped, an enemy we can't defeat, a dead end we can't cross, judgment closing in from behind. And into that hopeless position, God does the thing he does best. He makes a way through where there is no way. That's the cross. On our own, we were cornered between our sin and God's judgment with no escape at all. And Jesus opened a road straight through death itself. The New Testament even calls that passage through the sea a picture of baptism, going down into the water a slave and coming up the other side free, dead and raised to new life with Christ. The same waters that meant judgment for one side meant salvation for the other. At the cross, judgment fell, but it fell on our substitute, so the way home could finally open for us.
So what about your dead end? Maybe you did the right thing, the obedient thing, and it led you somewhere that feels like a trap. You said the hard yes, you walked the narrow road, and now you're cornered, quietly wondering if you misheard God entirely. This story says, don't assume you're out of his will just because you've run out of options. That trap might be the very place he is about to show you something you could never have seen on easy ground. And it hands you two things to do while you're standing at the edge of your own sea. First, stand firm. Stop frantically trying to fix what only God can fix. And second, go forward. Take the next step of obedience even when the way still isn't open. Because don't miss the order that day. God said go forward before the water ever moved. More often than not, the sea doesn't part until you take the first step toward it. So here's the whole thing in one line. The dead end wasn't God failing his people. It was God making a way through the impossible, in the exact spot where they were certain there was no way at all. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. That's the song Israel sang on the far shore. And whatever you're facing right now, with your back against the wall, the God who split a sea is not intimidated by your impossible. But here's the strange part. The same people who sang that song, who watched God drown an entire army in front of them, are going to be convinced he's abandoned them within a matter of weeks, this time over food and water. That's where we're headed next, into the wilderness, where God's provision runs headlong into Israel's very short memory. If this gave you fresh eyes for a story you thought you already knew, subscribe and come with us into the desert.